Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here, because today we're setting the stage for a seriously fascinating look into something that affects, well, pretty much every family on the planet. We're talking about the complex socioeconomic factors that actually drive our educational decisions. You know, we often think of education as this straightforward path, right? But scratch beneath the surface, and it's this massive web of choices, trade-offs, and daily logistics. So, what really drives where we send our kids to school? It's kind of the ultimate universal parenting dilemma. Whether you're looking at preschools or universities, education is a deeply personal journey, but it's guided by very global, relatable pressures. I mean, from the raw cost of tuition to the perceived status of an institution, the weight on a household is just immense. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're looking at the school choice dilemma, basic education and prestige, public versus private realities, higher education challenges, and finally, pathways to educational equity. Starting right off with Section 1, the school choice dilemma.
To really ground our explainer today, we're drawing directly from the incredible insights of researcher Oluyomi Ola-David. She became super interested in the nitty-gritty of school choice by actually just observing her own local community. Specifically, she focused her research on school transitions in the suburbs of Nigeria. And her process? It was deeply personal. She started by going straight to the source, interviewing local parents who had kids right in those basic education age brackets. By talking directly with these households, she uncovered the real, on-the-ground motivations driving their decisions.
Which brings us to Section 2, basic education and prestige. Now, you might be thinking flashy marketing does the trick, right? Well, she found that while school ads and billboards might pull in a little bit of business, that's not what actually closes the deal. Not at all. Instead, prospective parents go on these intense, self-driven fact-finding missions. She discovered that parents rely heavily, and I mean heavily, on their own social and business networks to get first-hand testimonials. They trust word of mouth and actual lived experiences way more than a glossy brochure. And as she dug deeper into those early choices, she pinpointed a few massive driving factors. First off, parents are extremely anxious that their kids' cognitive achievements stay on par with children at comparator schools. Nobody wants their kid falling behind, right? Because of this, she found many parents are totally willing to pay extra fees, and they'll travel way farther from home just to snag a spot in a high-performing, prestigious school. Plus, for preschoolers especially, she noticed a huge preference for small class sizes, believing it just gives kids a much better starting block. Moving on to Section 3, public versus private realities. Now, this is a particularly striking finding from her interviews. You'd probably assume that low-income households would just automatically default to free public education. But actually, she observed that low-income families often patronize and even prefer low-cost private schools. Why? Literally just to avoid public schools that are overcrowded and dilapidated. The crumbling physical state of the public infrastructure directly pushes these families to hunt down affordable private alternatives. And this brilliantly illustrates another everyday reality, the commute itself. She points out a really stark contrast in that daily journey to school. Many public school pupils are finding their way there completely unaccompanied, often having to navigate public transportation alone. Contrast that with the private school kids, who are way more likely to be walked right to the gates by a guardian or put safely on an organized school bus. It's a mini-narrative that paints a really vivid picture of the totally different levels of security these students experience every single morning. Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, higher education challenges. So as the stakes get higher and the costs skyrocket, the whole decision matrix gets even more complex. What are wealthier families prioritizing now? Well, she highlights three main things at the university level. Number 1, prestige is still king. Number 2 is the certainty of school calendars, basically knowing exactly when semesters start and finish. And number 3, they are absolutely laser-focused on employability prospects. They want to ensure that degree actually lands a solid job. But then she contrasts those upper-class priorities with the stark reality for lower-income households. The options shrink dramatically here. She notes that without scholarships, children from poorer families are vastly more likely to just enroll in public institutions. The luxury of picking a school based on pure prestige or perfect calendars, it's just not there without financial help. And going to those public institutions comes with systemic hurdles. She observed that most of these public higher ed institutions are often adversely affected by lengthy industrial disputes and actions by union workers. To be clear, we're just looking at the data she gathered on how these disruptions totally upend the certainty of those school calendars and stretch out the educational timeline for students relying on the public system.
let's move to how families actually pay for this, because it's a huge piece of the puzzle. She found that household income streams and equity financing are the biggest determinants of school choice. Sure, some families might use debt options to finance their kids' education, but at the end of the day, it really boils down to the core equity and daily income the family can generate to keep these long-term investments afloat.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Pathways to Educational Equity. Looking ahead, she sees massive, completely untapped opportunities for understanding this whole space better. Specifically, she says there's huge research potential in studying the direct role parents and guardians play in learning and cognitive development. We know they're the ones driving the school choice, right? But she points out we really need more studies to map exactly how their involvement at home directly fuels a child's cognitive success. And when it comes to actual structural solutions, she points to some specific global models for designing equitable education delivery. She highly recommends looking at the Finnish education system and the Israeli education system as real-world blueprints that can help guide us toward much better, fairer policy. This all builds to her ultimate, incredibly powerful call to action. She writes, "We can work to ensure uniformity in the quality of both private and public schools for the good of all." It's a profound vision, really. Think about it. If the quality is uniform everywhere, that agonizing dilemma over prestige, the fear of crumbling infrastructure, the intense financial stress just to get a good basic education, all of that is mitigated. So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. How can your community bridge the gap between prestige and affordability? Based on everything she uncovered, from the preschool prestige race to university strikes, how do these exact dynamics play out in your own backyard? Are we relying way too much on wealth to secure quality, or are we actively working toward that uniform standard? It's definitely something for all of us to think about as we advocate for the next generation. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep asking those big questions.